Okay, so this is going to be your lecture notes for the structure of Earth and plate tectonics. Specifically, we're going to go into the different types of plates that are found in the Earth. We're going to review that the structure of the Earth is made up of about three main layers. You have the inner core, the outer core, and the mantle. And then on the very outside, you have the crust. The crust is where we live. It's made up of two different types. There's continental crust, and then there's oceanic crust. Obviously, the way that they're named, this is the land, the continent crust, and the oceanic crust is what will be found at the bottom of the oceans. Okay? The continental crust is thick, it's buoyant, meaning it can float, it's less dense than the oceanic crust, and it's older. The oceanic crust is thin and it will go underneath the continental crust. And it's usually a younger crust because different parts of the magma are coming up through the bottom and constantly producing new oceanic crust. The way that we know what the Earth is made of is by geographical surveys that do like seismic things, gravity. They do investigations on the land, they do survey and field work, and they're able to tell by digging and boring holes what is going on in our Earth. So when we're talking about plate tectonics is that if you could look at a map of the world, you might notice that these pieces, if you put them together, they kind of fit like they would fit as a puzzle. Plate tectonics is that the Earth's crust is divided into, 12 major plates that move in different directions. And this causes them to bump into each other, to pull apart from each other, or to rub up against each other. And each one of these interactions is called a tectonic feature. So they have specific names when they collide or they pull apart or scrape, but it's called a tectonic feature. So one of your assignments you needed to do was to color the different plates in the world. So we're looking at, these are the continents in here. So you can see the plates do not specifically go on the continents. They might divide a continent in half or a different area. This is the Pacific plate. This is the North American plate. And they all slide and move and bump along each other. So the plates are at the very top. If you look, it's the lithosphere. So you have the crust here. You have the different layers. And this main part here is called the lithosphere, which is the upper crust, the upper mantle and the crust. This whole part right here. The orange and the gray part is called the lithosphere. And that's what the plates are made up of. Underneath the plates, you have this part right here, which is the mantle. Okay? And inside the mantle is the magma. And this is what we learned about last week when we were talking about convection currents. So you have the crust here. This is the lithosphere. You have the mantle under here, which is the magma. And you have these things called convection currents, which means they're constantly going in a circle, meaning that the hot magma goes up and then the cool magma goes down, and it constantly circles as it's being heated by the outer core. The hot magma goes up, circles around, and goes back down. And it's constantly making these circles inside of the mantle, which in turn moves the plates on top in different directions, okay? So this convection current is moving it here. So this plate on this lithosphere is moving this way. Whereas you have this, you have this mantle convection current going here. So this lithosphere is moving this way. So what you're getting here is that right in the middle, they're moving apart. And then right here, they're bumping into each other, these two plates. And right here, this one's going down into a trench and this one's coming up. And all of these different interactions between the lithospheres will cause different sorts of geographical phenomenons, like a volcano or an earthquake or a mountain, okay? So let's look at the three types of boundaries of where these plates can touch and hit. We have three types of boundaries. There's the divergent, where the two plates are going to move away from each other. You have the convergent plates where the two plates are going to bump into each other. And then you have the transform boundaries where they're going to slide up against and next to each other. Let's look first at the divergent boundaries. So what you have is, because of the convection currents moving it underneath, you have two plates that are going to be spreading apart from each other. And okay, so this is something that's going to happen very slowly over time. It's not like they're going to spread a giant gape in 5 years. This is something over hundreds of years. These plates are slowly moving apart from each other. And as they move apart, this new magma stuff is going to come up into the space in between where they're separating, okay? In addition, this oceanic crust is going to subduct underneath this continental crust and push down into the water. This one's going to push down. And what that's going to push up, if you look right here, is you might produce a volcano. Because the crust is here, the magma's coming up through the ground, and you're going to produce like a volcano right there. In turn, right in between the two plates might be separating. When they move apart, you're going to be doing a ridge, or like an oceanic trench might be forming right down there in the middle of the ocean. Okay? The other thing that can happen is, because these are spreading apart, there's going to be magma coming up through the middle here. And you can see this little formation right here. Divergent boundaries also form islands. So the magma comes up, it cools, and it turns into a land, and that's going to form an island. So if you look at something like Iceland, it's an example of two divergent boundaries running through the middle, and it has produced giant volcanoes of magma coming up. And also part of its entire island, the fact that it's Iceland, is because these two plates are moving apart from each other, and then the island is forming there. Okay, now we have convergent boundaries. Those are the two that are going to bump into each other, or smash. There are three types of convergent boundaries. You have the continent and the continent, where the two land formations are bumping into each other, the two land plates. You have continent-oceanic crust, where the land plate is bumping into an oceanic crust plate. And then you have ocean to ocean. And these all form different things. So let's look at continent to continent. When you have two plates that are bumping into each other from continental crust, they're going to slowly push, One of them is going to push down. And then what's going to happen is, in between, it's going to raise because of the density pushing this whole thing up. And what you're going to get are mountain ranges, big, giant mountain ranges. And that's how the Himalayas have formed. That's the Alps. Let's look at these. All of these mountain ranges, if you go right down the middle of them, it is where there is a plate boundary pushing those things together. Okay. Then you have the continent to oceanic collision. And what's going to happen in this, and this is a key word you need to know, is called subduction. And you have your continental plate bumping into your oceanic crust. And since the oceanic crust is more dense, it's going to subduct or go underneath the continental crust. And as a result, it's going to allow some of this mantle to come up through here, and it's going to form volcanoes. So another way you get volcanoes is with the continental and oceanic crust going in. Here's a closer look at what subduction is. Subduction is when you have the ocean crust going underneath the continental lithosphere, and you need to know that, so write that down. The oceanic lithosphere is going underneath the continental lithosphere, and as a result, you will get volcanoes or dormant volcanoes like the Andes. The last sort of collision you have for plates are ocean to ocean, which is when two oceanic plates collide. What happens again is the similar situation where you'll have a subduction, but in this case, you have the ocean floor is causing a trench. So the biggest trench that we know of is called the Mariana Trench, and here is a picture of it. It's the deepest part of any ocean that we know. Man or unmanned vehicles can go in and have explored small parts of this trench. And they have discovered new species like this fish being photographed here. It's an amazing ecosystem. It has no light. It has a whole different species of animals because the trench is so deep. The third type of boundary are transform boundaries, and these are in which the plates slide past each other. The most obvious example that we have is living in California, in the Bay Area, is the San Andreas Fault. And so you have a plate boundary here and a plate boundary here, and instead of bumping in or separating, they're just going to slide back and forth against each other. And what we know best, what these form, is earthquakes. So you have here, if you look, the San Andreas Fault right here is going to cause the transform. It's going to slide. The right here, where did I see it? This is the Middle American Trench. These are two plates that are moving apart from each other. And actually, this whole circle right here, if you look at it in the Pacific Ocean, is called the Ring of Fire. And that's because it has so many plates that are moving and bumping and adjusting against each other that you can just find so many volcanoes and islands in this area on the Pacific Plate called the Ring of Fire. If you look over here, here's the Marianas Trench, the Japan Trench. So these are all different plate boundaries that you can see. This is the Pacific Ring of Fire of what I was talking about. And all the little red spots on this map are where volcanoes, active volcanoes, are formed. And again, we'll remind you that the volcanoes are formed by the subduction of the continental crust and the ocean crust, separating and forming volcanoes. Volcanoes, where it separates, islands. And again, here's the Ring of Fire. So, let's see. What are the hot spots for volcanoes? It's what we've been saying. The mantle plume comes up from the oceanic crust, and the Hawaiian Island are a chain of examples of hotspots for volcanoes where a lot of tectonic activity has happened and formed islands and volcanoes. Okay, I think we're gonna stop there. We'll do a quick summary. Basically, the Earth is made up of three main layers: the core, the mantle, and the crust. And on the surface, in the lithosphere of the Earth, are tectonic plates that slowly move around the globe. Okay? The plates are made up of the crust and the upper mantle, which we just said was the lithosphere. There are two types of plates, continental and oceanic plates, and there's three types of boundaries: convergent, divergent, and transform. Volcanoes and earthquakes are closely linked to tectonic plates. So those are the main facts you need to take away from this lecture. Please submit your notes through Schoology, and we'll talk about it when I see you at lab. Thanks.